I'll take the example of this place, Tupran, like I mentioned. People said that since the borewells came in, the open wells dry up in January, February. I was there in March and the deeper wells were dry, even the deeper ones.
All I know is that we have a bunch of granite in South India and we have these deep borewells which seem to be getting deeper every year.
So, the way to think about water in granitic rocks is that water itself has created space for itself.
Whenever we are relying on tankers or groundwater, generally we are finding that, salinity is a bit higher. You use it directly to, especially say, wash your hair.
Right.
You'll have more hair fall. Whereas, clean water from the Kaveri, from the river,
Yeah.
is usually much less salty.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Well Lab show, where we try to learn more about water, environment, land, and livelihoods. I'm Pavan Srinath. Every 2 weeks, we'll sit with some of our colleagues at Well Labs or talk to some of our wonderful partners and learn more about the science, the systems, and the stories around complex environmental and social issues. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Pavan Srinath and welcome to the Well Lab show. I'm here today with my colleague Vivek Grewal, and we are here to talk about honestly one of my favorite topics, which is understanding the groundwater and the aquifers of South India and of Bangalore and of home, right? So we have Vivek coming all the way from Jaipur to Bangalore, so we've got him in studio. And Vivek, you have been working yourself on understanding the aquifers of South India as well.
Right.
But we are here in South India where we get a decent amount of rain, but maybe what's happening with the groundwater is a little more challenging or challenging in different ways. So we'll spend some time today talking about understanding what exists below the ground, understanding how water, stays and flows, and also what has changed really in the last few decades, and maybe end with understanding, okay, if you go to a region, maybe a rural part of South India, how do you help water security there? How do you manage things there? All I know is that we have a bunch of granite in South India and we have these deep borewells which seem to be getting deeper every year. So help us understand what kind of rock are we sitting on?
So essentially, I think one good way to think about it is that the whole of South India is a large granitic gneiss. It's
Okay.
a big chunk.
N-I-C-E, nice. It's very nice.
Yeah. GNEISS.
Okay.
But it is a single large monolith of rock in a crude way, if you can say that. Uh, Even below the Ganga, even below the basaltic Maharashtra, everywhere there is the old basement rock, as they say. That basement exists, and that is the gneissic complex that has a lot of complexity, but it is the whole of India is that one big rock.
So below most kinds of rock in the world, you
Yeah.
will find granite and gneiss.
Yeah.
And can you spend like a minute just talking about what is gneiss? Most of us understand granite. We've seen it. They form the rectangular stones that we use sometimes to line our sidewalks.
Right.
They consist of the hills that we see all around Bangalore, right?
Right.
Every one of the durgs, if you see the big exports monoliths from Nandi Hills to elsewhere,
Right.
you can see the granite.
Right.
What is gneiss?
So, if I start with granite, granite is a rock which was a large, if you want, bulb of magma, molten yellowish magma, but that was below the ground, deep, a few kilometers deep, which cooled slowly.
Okay.
And then it was brought up and it was cooling all that while. And because it cooled slowly, its minerals, let's say, grew big, and that's what we call granite. Now, gneiss is a type of metamorphic rock,
Okay.
and metamorphic rocks is
Bad flashes of high school geography, but
but essentially, if you crumble, fold, put pressure, put temperature on a basic parent rock, you get a metamorphic rock, and gneiss is a type of metamorphic rock. One nice way to identify it would be foliations or bands of light colored and dark colored. So we're sitting close to the Lalbagh Peninsular gneiss. You would, if you stand there, you would find much of it of a slightly darker grayish, bluish sort of a thing, but there will be large bands of white in between. So if you find bands in a granitic rock, it is probably gneiss, because that pressure separates out those bands.
Okay, so most of the time, like the way we say, like stone that we use for our houses, you get marble and you get granite.
Yeah.
But whatever we call granite is actually some kind of granite to gneiss.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, especially the good stones that people buy and polish, they'll have flecks of good, mica, they'll have these stripes and striations.
Right.
Sometimes it feels like water flowing, all of that.
Yeah.
So when we say granite, we often mean granite and gneiss.
It's a spectrum. If the granite has seen a lot of pressure and
Got
it
it.
has foliations, it becomes nice. But yes, it is a spectrum and it varies.
Got it. Yeah. So this is what is below. This is the basement level. This is the foundation level for, you're saying, most places.
Right.
But here we don't have. We are not built more. The foundation itself has come up.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at the Earth system level, there are two broad places we know, right? One is ocean and one is continents. Oceans are mostly dark basaltic rock, lava cooled, and it's all blackish basaltic rock in the oceans. Continents, on the other hand, are granitic, and the basement of most of the rocks in all continents is granitic. So continents are granitic and oceans are basaltic. And the interesting thing is, granite is lighter than basalt.
Okay.
So basalt is more dense and heavy. So think of continents like ice cubes floating on water.
In geological
Time and
millions and hundreds of millions of years, things
Yeah.
will float up.
Yeah.
Okay. So from what I understand, this is a geology for non-geologists, basic, like 1% of knowledge that you've shared. Now, help us understand water. So this is the kind of rock we sit on. So what does that mean for groundwater?
So the way to think about water in granitic rocks is that water itself has created space for itself. Over millions of years, water has, and other elements of weathering, we can talk about weathering also, but they have basically created space in this hard rock for it to exist. So it's like long-term biogeochemical, process which basically creates the spaces. And what we've realized is that one of the main ways that water does it is that granite and gneiss have these biotite minerals. So if you see your kitchen top granite, you would find a lot of these black minerals,
Yeah.
or often elongated, platy. They are biotite, and they have a property that when they interact with water, they expand.
Okay.
So imagine deep inside granite, there is a biotite plate. And when water from the rainfall touches it, it expands a little bit. It at least pressurizes and creates that stress. So that stress slowly opens up cracks, among other things. So that is a type of chemical weathering.
Okay.
That water with a specific type of mineral changes its structure to create that physical stress. There are other types of dissolution. Let's say like water would interact with different minerals in the rocks, and it would take up a little bit of salt, which you would end up trying to reduce in your RO in Bangalore.
But this is true, right? Whenever we are relying on tankers or groundwater, generally we are finding that salinity is a bit higher. You use it directly to, especially say, wash your hair.
Right.
You'll have more hair fall. Whereas clean water from the Kaveri, from the river,
Yeah.
is usually much less salty.
Yeah. So most surface water is less salty, and the groundwater is more salty because it has these rock water interactions. So that is the water side of it. But what it has left in the ground is a hole.
Right.
So these fractures, and so that's how weathering happens. And what this has created over millions of years is three layers of rock, if you can imagine. If we start from the top, that would make sense because that's how we interact. So often in granitic areas in India, you would find that there is a weathered zone where if you kick that rock, it would crumble. So that's how I would define a weathered.
I mean, at the very top you have soil,
yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
and even soil is formed by some of the same materials, right?
Parent rock.
And then you have plants and other things growing on it, further breaking it apart, etc.
Exactly.
And we can see, right, especially when it rains, you can see, like, if you have a stubborn tulsi plant at home, even the steps you've built, there's one tiny hole there, there's no soil there,
Yeah.
but there's enough for a root to
Yeah.
take hold.
Yeah.
And you often see plants. So
Yeah.
you will have that. And I guess they also help contribute to
The weather.
breaking things down.
Yeah.
But below that, you're saying it is still rock, but it can crumble and become soil like
Yeah.
if you hit it or do something.
Right. Right. So soil is when the structure is completely lost and it has much more organic matter and stuff like that. Below that, so soil could be something like, let's say, 5 feet or so, 10 feet. Now, below that, from to the range of, let's say, 30 feet to 100 feet, you would find what you would call weathered rock. So some element of that structure of old rock or the way it was set up is there, but it is almost lost. And if you hit it with a hammer, it will crumble very easily. So unlike the layer below it, the weathering itself, a definition is the breaking down of rock. So that is said in the past tense that this one is done. Essentially, it's weathered. And the good part about these is in the granitic areas is that they have a lot of storage space.
So all the cracks, all the little breaks, everything
Yeah.
where there's no rock,
Yeah,
water can go.
yeah. So it's like it is essentially, if you want to simplify, it behaves like sandy alluvium aquifer in a simplified way. Uh, so it would have water to the extent of, let's say, 2 to 5% of that storage space has a porosity of 2 to 5%, and all of that can be filled up with water, as against an alluvial, which would be much higher.
So in sand, in alluvium, so in Ganga, you can have what, 10%
Yeah.
plus being water.
Right, something like that.
And some of that sand goes hundreds of meters, if not like a kilometer thick.
Yeah.
Whereas here, we don't have a kilometer thick of weathered rock
Yeah.
anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So you have what you said, typically what, 40 to 30 to
100.
30
Yeah,
to 100.
30 to 100
Okay.
feet of weathered zone. So essentially, think of it like the tank of this system, the storage tank. So this is where you store water, the weathered zone. Below that, there is the fractured zone. And think of these like the piping system.
Okay.
Okay. A leaky storage tank of the weathered zone exists above the piping system. And one way to find the distinction between these two is when you drill a well, you often have to put a casing so that the well does not fall into itself. That is required till the depth of weathered rock. So the rock does not have its structure in the weathered zone, so you need that additional 9-inch casing to protect it. Below that, in granitic areas, we don't put casing because we have entered solid rock area which has fractures, but it will not crumble and fall into itself. It is solid.
Okay.
So that is the
And this
distinction.
applies even to open wells to an extent, right? Like you need to line the open well
Exactly.
with
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
stones.
That's
and
also
so on.
casing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're building that with stones.
Yeah.
Otherwise, in a borewell, you're building that with a pipe
Yeah.
with something else.
Yeah. Like a PVC, earlier they used to use steel. And that actually, this is one of the best ways to identify the depth of weathered zone. If you go to a village and you ask people how many casing pipe did you put? They would say, I put 2 casing pipe. So it is 40 feet. Generally, we get a 20 feet casing pipe. So that's how you distinguish. So then you come to the fractured zone. So the fractured zone is commonly the fractures are oriented in the horizontal way, horizontal and what you call sub-horizontal, something like this. And one another way to think of it is like a sheet of fractures. So the or sheeting fractures that are like regionally kind of.
So you have different layers sort of stacked on top of each other,
Yeah.
and water can flow in between.
And in the fractured zone, the top part has a lot of fractures, but the presence of frequency of those fractures reduces drastically as you go deep. So the top, let's say 20-30 feet of fractured zone, that's what you want to strike to get water. So when in the olden time people dug open wells, they said dig it by hand and easier tools till you reach the stone. But don't stop there. Dig at least 5 feet of stone also. It is very hard work. You use your hammers and everything else. Or now, like, people use blasts, or they literally blast it, or if they don't use machines. But getting that 5 feet of solid rock also cut, all the pipes you can tap into basically to get that water.
So then it's not just water slowly dripping into your well, but you're connected to the larger pipes such that your well taps the nearby
Exactly.
body of water.
And the storage tank which exists above that pipe upstream.
Liking the episode so far? Hit the subscribe button on YouTube and check out more episodes of the Well Lab show. And hey, share this episode with a friend, a colleague, a student, or a fellow environmental enthusiast who might find this episode useful. We hope to reach more great people like you. So this is how a well worked.
Right.
So now people talk of saying we went 400 feet deep with our borewell, 600 feet, 1000 feet. You're finding ridiculous numbers. What are they actually touching there?
So, like I said, as you go deeper, the frequency of fractures reduces. In the geology logbooks, you would find it, fracture found at 120 feet, and then at 350 feet.
How do they do that? Like when you're drilling, the is like a change in pressure or something?
Yeah,
because
you would probably have water coming squishing out quickly
Okay.
when you're drilling, when you suddenly find a fracture. So basically, so as you go deeper, these deeper fractures are actually become more and more vertical. So imagine like a lot of horizontal ones at the top of the fractured zone, and more vertical ones or subvertical ones towards the bottom. So if I have a well here, and if I strike this subvertical fracture is tapping into that large tank above.
And some of these sort of kind of vertical fractures can also come from this granite and gneiss having been here for so long. Some tectonic movements over time, right?
Right.
Some pressure here and there,
Right.
something splits
Yeah.
a little bit.
So yeah, that is the older set. So what I described to you was the weathering focused fracturing. There is a lot of tectonic fracturing also. So over long time, let's say Antarctica squished into India, or in Africa and Antarctica squished India into each other and stuff like that. That, and then the moving apart, creates these faults. So when you look at the satellite imagery of granite, you see a lot of these lines here and there. And often these are the fault lines where the rivers exist, or even the small streams are generally in these tectonic lineaments. So, and these are often more vertical rather than horizontal.
Okay.
Because it has been brought together and then it's squished apart. So it creates these vertical fractures. But the interesting thing is that they both relate. Once you have a deep vertical fracture, the tendency of water to be there will be more, and all of the other type of weathering and creating of space is more.
Okay. So you're saying that when you have in the South Indian region streams and small rivers that flow on the surface, there'll also be water flowing below the surface in that area.
Correct. Yeah.
In all these
Yeah.
fractures, gaps,
In high
cracks.
probability. Like, for example, we were doing a project in Anantapur in Rayalaseema in Andhra. There, we found that the probability of having a well, a good well, a well producing well, is much higher in the valley close to the river. Let's say there's a stream, and 100-meter here or there, you would find a great spot for having a borewell. But if you go 500-meter or 1 kilometer upstream, there the borewells don't succeed as much, because the amount of deep weathering, a U shape of deeper weathering and more fractured rock. So there you could go up to 200, 300 feet of weathered zone, and then much deeper fractured zone. The fractured zone often, by the way, is like the review papers have concluded that it is double the thickness of the weathered zone. So if you have a 40 feet of casing in your well, you would probably have 80 feet or so of good fracturing there, and below that the fracturing becomes rarer and rarer.
All right. Another clarificatory question over here is, you have rainfall that happens every year. How does that rainfall actually talk to water in this weathered zone and deep below? Like whatever's in the weathered zone, it'll fill up in like weeks and months, right? Or if not faster. How quickly does water move down?
Yeah, I mean it varies. If it's a great, fracture that's large enough, let's say 2-inch fracture, then you would have within a day, you'd reach from the top to the however deep you want to go. If the fractured layer is thick enough, it takes a few days for water to reach there. And often there we found places where, the top layer has a lot of water, but sometimes in between, in at the deeper layers it's not. So it's like a moving slab of water also after rainfall.
But it moves in human time, right?
Yeah,
In like
it's quite quick
months,
actually.
days,
Yeah.
years. So, having clarified a few of these things, help us understand now. I think we've seen dramatic changes in South India in our lifetimes, or maybe a little before our lifetimes. What was it like for people to actually use the groundwater
Right.
50 years ago, 100 years ago?
Yeah.
And then we can talk about how people are using it now.
Yeah. So my understanding is that the pre-70s time in South India, people would have two types of access to water. One is a tank in their village, and the second is wells, open wells that are like large, 30, 40 feet diameter wells, right? Those are the two ways. Both of them are accessing the weathered zone or the shallow aquifer, if we can say that. So
But
essentially,
you're saying both of them access groundwater. Like even a tank,
yeah,
it's not just water's falling on the ground and I'm storing it, right?
right.
How is that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Of course, the first water that a tank will store will be the runoff. Tank is on the stream. The catchment of that tank takes in all that water, and that is stopped by this plug that is a check dam. So since the 1400s, 1500s, the temples have been doing that, and the whole complex. Yeah,
We have more tanks, and these are not lakes, right? These are built by humans.
right.
And South India has more tanks than perhaps anywhere else in the world, right? In terms of
Exactly.
how we've
Yeah,
done this.
it's a major thing in history which people have studied and written books on. Yeah. So the tank, it's a human-made structure which stops water. When you fly from North India to Bangalore, you would find tanks and tanks everywhere on the if you look out. But the interesting thing is, it is not just that surface water. So people traditionally, the use was through surface irrigation first. That was the
So
primary
use
thing,
cold water and release it
and
when
release it
cold.
through the sluice gates and etc. Now the thing is that the life of that tank or water, the seasonality of that water in that tank was much more dependable in the past. Why? Because it had a large watershed upstream, which was also full of water. And often the groundwater level, so look at my hand, the tank check dam is actually below the groundwater level. If you go upstream, if you go 5 kilometers upstream and water is still like 5 feet below your ground, that water level is much higher than that tank. So you keep releasing it slowly, and that groundwater supports the tank for a long while. So traditionally that was the system. And the wells also, the open wells used to have water, till the second crop, March, April, easily. Like we visited this place called Tupran, north of Telangana recently, and people said that we used to do it through wells. They were available for the longest time.
And people could get water out of wells for agriculture as well earlier.
Right,
So
through
things like,
mechanical ways.
I think I've seen these, Vishwanath Zen Rain Man has many of these photos and videos of these Persian wells,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
a bunch of cups on
yeah,
a long chain, right? And
yeah.
that way you can sort of fill
Rahat
them up.
that they call, or many other names. Yeah, yeah,
So people were using wells for irrigation, not just for drinking
yeah,
water for
yeah.
this period. But you're saying that a lot of this was groundwater. So groundwater was feeding the tanks and the lakes.
Right.
And I think we can also very clearly see, right? Whenever you have a tank and you'll say walk on the bund, below the bund you'll see much lower land,
Hmm.
usually with paddy
Hmm.
or with other crops,
Right.
and usually greener than the surroundings.
Right.
Because it's sort of the command area of
That tank.
that tank. So you had that. So and this was operational till about 50, 60 years
Yeah.
ago. What's happened since?
I think a lot of people understand the borewell revolution came in. The ability to drill through hard rock is the technological innovation which changed the socio-ecological dynamics of this, including agriculture. So it gave people the freedom to use the water below their feet to depths. Traditionally, open wells Like I said, we could not go deeper than 5 to 10 feet of hard rock, but now you could go much deeper. And we know that 300-400 meters of of aquifer also has water. That enabled people to put in these straws much deeper, and the number of those straws and the speed at which these mechanical pumps could extract, that is so massive. Imagine, all of them together pumping out water. The amount of, now the main problem comes in, which is that the hard rock total aquifer storage is not massive. If you compare it to northern India, where, like we said, over a kilometer of water is available sometimes, here it is just, a few 100 meters of water, and you can, within a season, all of these millions of wells can extinguish it. So basically, what it does is, I'll take the example of this place Tupran, like I mentioned. People said that since the bore wells came in, the open wells dry up in January, February. I was there in March, and the deeper wells were dry, even the deeper ones. And the second thing is, people were like, okay, why am I wasting all this land? People put soil back into their wells. They have closed their open wells in Tupran and said that, no, that's not needed. I'll use this for my cropping, because the water here fills up to the brim in the monsoon. Everything fills up to the brim, but it quickly goes down by January, February every year, because the speed at which people are extracting just after monsoon is massive.
So your tank is small and we are pulling out a lot of it.
Yeah.
So even when it rains, even when you have a great year, you're saying that it's not like there's a lot of extra space there below
Yeah.
which can absorb all that water.
Yeah.
It just fills up.
It just fills up.
And like you're saying, like even with the tank example, water does follow gravity.
Right.
And when things fill up, they flow.
Yeah.
Right. So as our streams flow down, groundwater, we can't stop it from flowing down.
Right. Right.
It will go away.
Yeah. So that's the second mechanism of why wells dry. The first mechanism is a lot of extraction, water level goes down naturally. Another natural reason for this is that we talked about these horizontal pipes below the tank. So these the sheeting fractures have a higher conductivity of water compared to the storage. And this is a bit of a natural phenomena. Some places have open wells which would tend to have water for longer compared to some other watersheds, like north of Bengaluru in Hesarghatta. We found one watershed on the right of Hesarghatta which does not dry up. In the the whole weathered aquifer does not dry up, and the other one which fully dries up very quickly within 2 months. And the reason is that this one has seen more weathering. The weathered zone is thicker, and the piping system is more conductive. We should think of it in 3 dimension. It is the upper parts of the watershed are much higher, at much higher elevation, like you said, and that piping system just pushes the water out, and those people are just, I would say, more vulnerable. It has weathered too much, and all of that water will they will lose their water, one, to this natural effect, and secondly they will pull out their water. So there's more scarcity by March. In that left side of aquifer of Hisarghatta, people lose their water. So it interacts very closely with how people do their agriculture.
Dear viewer, if you're liking the Well Lab show so far, you may also like the Water Data podcast with my colleague Veena Srinivasan. Veena is an award-winning water researcher and thinker and talks to some of the top minds in the world on everything water. You can find all episodes of the Water Data podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So, what you're also saying is, if you look at, say, northeastern Karnataka, it's almost the second driest region in India after
Right.
the Thar Desert.
Right.
So you don't have a whole lot of rainfall happening everywhere. There are pockets which receive decent amount of rainfall, above 1000 mm. A lot of places don't. So you don't have too much rainfall. You don't have too much storage.
Yeah.
So what you have is your groundwater is seasonal, just like your rainfall is.
Right.
And it's not like the past was this glorious time, right? Like what it meant 50, 60 years ago was, if your farm was situated in a good area,
Right.
if you were downstream of a tank, if you are in pockets you could grow,
in
do
the
farming
valleys, close
in
to
the
the valleys.
valleys. You
Yeah.
could do farming well. You could maybe even grow true crops from
Right.
time to time.
Right.
But if you didn't have a farm in the valley,
Right.
you were fully at the mercy of the rain.
Right.
And what you're saying is that because of borewells, more people, it became more democratic that you could also pull out water.
Correct.
And so even if your farm was not in the best position, you could try and grow more.
Right.
But it also meant everybody is now pulling water out and there's just not enough water to go
True.
around.
Yeah. So you see those things in the increase in what we call cropping intensity. The double cropping has increased.
Hmm.
The core valleys would have double cropping traditionally also possibly, but the upstream areas or higher up in the watershed, they can go deep enough to tap into their deeper water and do that.
So, given that this is the transformation that we've seen in our lives, and I think there are many other places which I think there was a conversation between Veena and Somsekhar Rao on the Water Data podcast on how, Africa is in a situation where India was 50 years ago. But will they go down the same path and within the one generation or two generations change the game fundamentally? Or can they still, bank on what they have? And even in India, right, I think there might be parts of Odisha which mirror Karnataka from
Yeah.
50 years ago.
Yeah.
There are lessons that perhaps we can learn for other parts of India where there is more water right now. We have less exploitation of the water.
Right.
But then do we go down the exact same path or do we do it a little more sustainably is a question.
That's a big question for the future. But one example is Jharkhand. For example, there are pockets in Jharkhand where the stage of development, how much of the replenishable annual water you're using, is below 30%, 20%. So in Karnataka, much of it would be above 80% or 100% also. So you're quickly using all of your water and losing it by January, February. In Jharkhand, the prevalence of borewells is not that deep, I would say, for now. And one way for the future that people are saying is that if we are able to uh, provide access in a more sustainable way by focusing on the shallow aquifer. And the key here is that at greater depths, the cost benefit is not that great. The storage, like we discussed, is not a lot. So the total storage is not a lot. You do get a wider catchment for your borewell, but if people are able to limit themselves to the shallower part and are able to recharge in the upstream, so put water in the upstream and extract in the valleys through open wells, then it's a much more sustainable method of doing it, and also electricity costs etc. will be more manageable for the exchequer.
Okay. So I want to come to like sort of the last stage of our discussion for today, which is that, okay, this is the situation, this is how the geology is, this is the nature in which how we've been extracting water and using it. Now, you and your team of technical consultants, right,
Yeah.
who go in and try to help people or regions or organizations manage water security better. If you were to go to a region like Tupran or somewhere else in South India, what do you try to do? What do you look for? Uh, some of the picture painted is, look, we're just in a bad state right now. We can't do much.
Yeah.
So how do you go and help people improve their water security?
So I would say it starts before going to the field, and a lot of biophysical or whatever groundwater levels data collected, a lot of feedback from the community on the water use, and a lot of long term data also collected that we have to be there in different seasons to understand. So that's the shorter answer. And when I say before going to the field, the first thing we have to start with is a good conceptual model of this is how it works. So we have a general conceptual model of how granitic aquifer exists. Like we discussed, three layers of a weathered zone, a fractured zone, and solid rock below that. That is what you start with, right? Then the next main question is, what is the thickness of weathered zone?
Hmm.
And the main answer for that is, you ask people, like I said, what is the casing depth that they have put their casings to. So let's say you get an answer for two pipes. So it's 40 feet of casing there. You can go to a open well and see whether what is the casing that's available there. So with the open wells, it's you can literally see it and ask people what is the pitching that they did for the depth. So that gives you a sense of weathering, that this is how much storage is available.
And you now also have Central Groundwater Board reports,
Correct.
right, where they've done this analysis for a few points,
Correct.
looked at the depth of the
Yeah.
wells.
So all of that data, slowly, I think we're able to understand what is the thickness of the weathered zone in many different areas. Like in the Bundelkhand area, we are finding it is lesser in total thickness of weathered zone compared to the southern India. And then the most revealing question, I would say, is what happens to water level in your open wells. Let's start with monsoon. The probable answer, and what the answer we got in Tupran, for example, is that water levels fill up to the brim. Our team went in August, and we have pictures from the same well that is filled to the brim in August, and in March it was bone dry, like 200 feet. It was a very deep well, like more than 100 feet deep well, which was very dry. So essentially, that tells you that that is like an X-ray for the area, right? This is your depth, and and people tell you when it dries up. So in the case of Tupran, it is like around February, water levels tend to dry up. So then what's the inference? It means that things fill up and all of the weathered zone is going down. And then let's say you get an answer for weathered zone being let's say 50 feet or something. So we know that double of that, there are a lot of fractures. So fractured zone is, let's say, 100 feet. So that 150 feet, you have a lot of water still remaining. And then you start to focus on the agriculture side. Before we go to the field, we should have an understanding of which areas grow double cropping and which areas do single cropping. That is the people's felt reality of water availability. People are trying to, in southern India, people are trying to improve their incomes justifiably to the point where they do have access to land and water. So that is the limit often. The correlation between the amount of double cropping and the water availability in the Rabi season is very strong. And the good part is that remote sensing is able to give us this double cropping area decently well. So you go ahead in Tupran, we knew that, oh, these valleys have double cropping, and they have these 4 or 5 tanks also in the watershed. So there's a lot of cropping happening. Now you go and ask the farmer, what do you grow there, right? So a proper calendar of what are the top 3 crops in the monsoon season, top 3 crops in the Rabi season. And in Tupran, for example, we found a clear distinction in the valley and the upland areas. The valley grows 2 times rice, and that is a lot of water usage because the area is around 700 of rainfall, and a rice for one season needs over 1000
Okay.
So they are growing.
And you're looking at water as because it's over an area, right?
Yeah.
So you need the equivalent of 1,000 millimeters of rainfall to fall on that area
Yeah.
just to grow rice.
Yeah.
In one season.
Yeah.
And the overall in the year that area gets 700 millimeters.
Yeah. And the reason that's happening is that they are using the area of the upstream. So their area might get 700, and there is 3 times the area upstream that is providing water to that valley. That is how it gets that 2000 of rainfall to grow that double paddy. The issue then is that the upstream area does get a lot of rainfall, but it has a seasonal groundwater variation. So they don't have water in the Rabi season. There is a transition zone where the local NGO is trying to ensure that the soil moisture, whatever falls there, is properly captured. There are recharge shafts put in to ensure that whatever last rain you get in November, December, all of that fills up the aquifer again, right? So those are the things that are important, and the upland folks are in a much more vulnerable situation. So another question we would post it, if a year is bad. So last year was not that good. Before that, there were 3 good years in southern India. So if it's a bad year, do you change your cropping? So if it is this upland area, you would get an answer that yes, we decided to not grow this and we grow that. So that is how you are able to understand people's engagement with water and able to diagnose and design better solutions.
Vivek, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation and giving us honestly a primer and an intro to how to understand aquifers in South India. I think we should talk about how do you manage aquifers in an urban context, because it's another beast. When you go to a village, you can talk to people, you have open wells, you understand the surface. Whereas even small towns, and then you take a city like Bangalore, we've changed the surface fully.
Yeah.
We've changed the subsurface also significantly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how many lakh borewells have been drilled in Bangalore. When you drill that many pipes, you're creating new
Connectivity.
Yeah, there's new weathering, right? Yeah, the weathering is the borewell. So I think it's a fundamentally different challenge to understand.
Good one.
And we also have leaky pipes, right? We have leaky sewage pipes. We have a leaky water pipes. All of that is recharging the ground. Crazy things happening.
Yeah.
So maybe we save that for another day.
Sure.
But thank you for joining me on the Well Lab Show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Well Lab Show. Don't forget to subscribe to the Well Labs YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends and colleagues. Until next time.